All right, Jarrod, hang on. Let me think of what shows
You're
I
right.
got to do.
Just start making up names of shows.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to what can only be described as not an episode of Good for a Change. I'm Jarrod, and not with me is Holly, and not with me is Sean. What you're going to hear today, guys, is kind of a bonus episode. This is actually an interview I recently got to do with Muppet performer Matt Vogel. Matt is an accomplished puppeteer and director who performs characters such as Big Bird and the Count on Sesame Street, as well as Floyd Pepper, Uncle Deadly, Constantine, and of course Kermit the Frog with the Muppets. In this chat, Matt and I discuss his childhood doing puppet shows for local kids, the 9th grade talent show that shook his confidence, and what brought him back. We talk about his audition for Big Bird and swap some stories about the original performer of Big Bird, Carol Spinney, before talking about Matt's meeting with Jerry Nelson to chat about the characters Matt was to inherit from him. We also very briefly touch on the debacle that surrounded Matt's casting as Kermit and the divisive responses on social media. We then chat about Matt's own podcast called Below the Frame, where he interviews his fellow Muppet performers and production staff and shines the spotlight on Jerry Nelson's life and music. You can listen to Below the Frame wherever you get your podcast, and believe me, it is well worth your time. So without further ado, please enjoy this chat with my pal, Matt Vogel. Well, hello, Matt. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Jarrod. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure. I mean, we're not actually here.
No.
It makes it sound like we're in the same room. We're not.
I know, but we're not.
You're in a very nice little booth. I'm in a bedroom with a chainsaw not far from me, so we'll see what happens.
And we are like around the world from each other.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part.
Yeah.
We are in completely different time zones.
That's right. And different days too, aren't we?
Different days.
We're
I am
literally
in the future.
different days. Yes, you are. How is it going to go today?
Not great.
Darn it.
They don't come up with a vaccine or anything yet.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so we're stuck.
All right. I
Sorry,
guess
pal.
Sleep through tomorrow then. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Tell me, Matt, I don't know much about your early life before the Muppets. Where were you born?
I was born
Let's go all the way back.
All right. I was born in a town called Kansas City, Kansas. It's in the middle of the country, and Kansas Kansas and Missouri are right next to each other, and there is a Kansas City, Kansas, and a Kansas City, Missouri, and they are two completely separate municipalities. They're completely separate cities. But I was born on the Kansas side.
Are either of them the Wizard of Oz, Kansas?
Well, I think the Wizard of Oz, Kansas is farther out toward the middle of Kansas. And
Okay.
I usually, when I say I'm from Kansas City, usually somebody does say, "Did you have a dog named Toto?"
No.
And I say no, because I didn't.
All right. Well, that was the next 4 of my questions.
Yep. Yeah, just scratch
I'll get rid of
those.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did your parents do?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but then later, when I was in high school, she went back to school, and then she graduated with a degree to become a social worker. And that's that's what she did until she retired. She just retired last year.
Wow! All right.
Yeah, and my dad was he owned his own company along with his brother. They owned a company that would package chemicals, like heavy-duty chemicals like muriatic acid or alcohol or different things like that, and then they were kind of distributing those chemicals. And the thing that my dad did really was he was an engineer, really. He would build machines that would bottle the product, and then he build other machines that would cap the bottles. And then even other machines that would then put tape on the boxes and things like that. He was really smart, but he was not formally educated. He just kind of picked it all up on his own.
Really?
Yeah, my dad
That's
was
so interesting.
Yeah, it was. And my dad was a guy that was always able to fix something. He knew a little bit about everything. He could fix cars. He could build a deck out back. He was able to. He built me a puppet stage, a couple of puppet stages actually when I was a kid.
Let's talk then a little about puppetry when you were a kid. Was it something that you were interested in back then, as in, was it a hobby? Or was it something you thought, I could actually do this?
Well, I never knew that doing what I do today, I never knew that that was an actual job that I could do. I never thought that that was a thing. I think some of it was, yeah, I thought maybe that I was going to, I thought the people that did that job, they already did it. They already had that job.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think I did it just as a hobby, because I had my own puppet company as a kid, as like a 5th or 6th grade kid. I had the Vogel Puppet Company.
Imaginative name.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
It may have been the V Puppet Company too at one point, but then I think it was the Vogel Puppet Company. And I made my brother Jason, who's 3 years younger than me, I made him help me out with puppet shows. And at first I just started doing puppet shows for kids in the neighborhood, just with whatever puppets that we had. We had some Sesame Street puppets, and we had some Muppet puppets, like the animal. I had the animal puppet and the Rolf puppet, and we had the Kermit puppet. And then I started making my own puppets, and this was around 3rd or 4th grade. I made my own, and I was not a builder of in any way. I built them out of masking tape and T-shirts, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I'd clearly been inspired by Jim Henson and by the Muppet Show and by Sesame Street, and that's kind of where that came from.
What were some of the characters that you were building?
Oh, they were just people.
Random characters.
They were people. Yeah. At first they were not, because all I had was white T-shirts.
Yep.
So they were these just humanoid type characters. And I built like the first one was this character named Max Morgan, and I think his name was Max Morgan because I think I had something like a toy ID or something, like when you'd get like a play set of some sort, and there was like a toy ID in it. And I think, I may not be completely accurate on this, but I think I had something with a card on it, and it said Max Morgan. I was like, well, that's the name of the character. So, as a kid.
Yeah. So what kind of shows then were you doing? Were you just making stuff up on the spot? Were you lip syncing to songs? Were you stealing things that you'd seen on TV?
I never did any lip sync to songs. Funnily enough, I would do. I think for the kids in the neighborhood, I would just kind of make stuff up like a kid does.
Yeah.
I don't think I had any plan, really. And then when I would bring the show and do it for my school, for my grade school, I had some stories that I had written. One of them was like a Great Pumpkin type story from like the Peanuts. It was it was a takeoff on that. And then I would write stories that were kind of, I think they were mirroring other stories that I'd heard. I don't know that they were 100% original.
So then, obviously doing this for the kids at school, what was their reaction? And I only asked because, like, when I was, I'd say probably 9 or 10, I got this crocodile puppet, like a hand puppet. It was quite Muppet style. And I used to take it to school with me. And I would find, like, half the kids in my class were, oh my God, that is the most fun thing ever, and they'd all want to play with it and talk to it. And then you had a bunch of other kids who thought they were too cool for puppets.
Right.
So what was that reaction?
I feel like I was blissfully ignorant to whatever their reaction was. I had a couple of friends that helped me out. I'm thinking of one show in particular that I feel like it was a Halloween show that we did in the library, and I don't remember what grade it was. It may have been 7th grade by then. And I had a couple of my friends, Brian Stubler, who I still keep in touch with today, and another friend named Scott Erskine, and we did a puppet show in the library. And I have a feeling that probably kids were just thinking, well, I got out of class for this, so it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nobody ever was really outwardly negative about it until a talent show that I did in 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really when I think I became aware that maybe what I was doing was not seen as either cool or, the thing that the cool kids would prefer me doing. So the talent show, I was in 9th grade, and my dad had built a new stage for me because he had built these stages for me over the years. And I had this one, when I was in 5th or 6th grade that he had built. We would do PTA meetings and other kinds of shows, and like church shows, things like that. And then for 9th grade, he had built me this new stage, and we did this show that I had written actually with a teacher. One of the teachers we collaborated on this show, writing the show. And we did the show. It was myself and my friend Brian Stubler. And at the end of the show, we won the talent show, which was awesome to win. And my mom had made us these shirts too. I think they said Vogel puppets on them, and they were these. I had a red Vogel puppet shirt that I'm pretty sure she had made for us.
Yep, lovely.
It was so sweet. And when I won, I remember hearing boos. I remember hearing boo. Now, it wasn't like overwhelming. It was not like there were, an entire gymnasium full of kids booing. But I think when you're a sensitive 9th grader, that the negativity cuts through any positivity, and it really crushed me. I mean, I think in that moment I put on a brave face, but after that I put the puppets away. I didn't bring them out to anything. That was it.
Okay. That's
cheery.
That was genuinely a little bit heartbreaking.
It is, but you know what? It in the end of the day, look at where I am now.
Yeah.
And
well, the
something
thing is
made
as
me
well,
come back to it.
A lot of those kids probably now sit back and go, I knew him when he was in high school. Like these kids who are booing, it's funny because when I was in high school, don't get me wrong, I was a Muppet fan, but I wasn't as, I have a Kermit tattoo. I wasn't anything like that.
I've seen it. I've seen it. Yes.
Yeah, you've seen it. But they, a lot of the, not a lot of the kids, but there were some of the kids back then who were very much like, what do you went to Sesame Street for?
Yeah.
And I can understand that to a point, where they were coming from. But these are the same kids now who I'm friends with on Facebook, who when I interview Kermit or Grover or Cookie or whoever it is, are the ones who are the most excited about it.
Yeah.
And I just find that juxtaposition, if I could go back in time and tell myself at 15, and keep in mind, I didn't really mind too much back then. But at one point, this is what you're going to be doing, and they're going to be cool with it or into it. I think it would have made some of those moments that little bit easier.
I think so. And I think that's a really interesting thing to say that, because there's a lot of bullying and negativity that goes on in schools, and in that age, in that time of growth, when you're growing up and figuring out who you are, and it makes it a little scary for people to try to be different or to be interested in something that maybe might be seen as childish or might be seen as not the cool thing.
Yeah.
And to know that, there is life beyond school.
Absolutely.
And
there's a really good quote from Modern Family that I think about, where one of the characters, I can't remember which one it is, says, he was talking to whoever the young kid was, Manny. He says, when you're in high school, everyone wants to be the same. And then almost overnight, everyone wants to be different. Yeah. And I'm like, and I think that is such an important quote that a lot of kids need to know. And I've got young cousins and stuff who are in high school, and I have told them that before. I've had cousins who have said to me, who were 15, 16, and go, what are you, into, you interview Cookie Monster. You're like, aren't you 30? Well, yeah, but, and I've said to them before, I'm like, yeah, in 5 years, you're going to think that's cool. And they go, oh, yeah, fair enough. And now I've got them who are, some of them are older, and they go, yeah, fair enough, that was pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, all right, you put the puppets away then for
Yes.
how long? At what point did you? What did you decide to do then? Because I know you did some acting as well.
Well, I did. Well, my mom was really observant, and she knew that I needed some sort of creative outlet. So she signed me up for acting classes at this children's theater in Kansas City. It's still there. It's called Theater for Young America, and it's run by Gene and Cheryl Mackey and their daughter Valerie. And I met them when I was a ninth grader, and I started taking acting classes at first, and of course, I didn't know anybody there, and it was completely outside of my comfort zone. But I very quickly discovered that these people were like me. These kids that were my age were just like me. We were alike, and I was accepted, and I felt confident. And I quickly started doing shows. They had a summer acting program that I did, and we would do, and it would like culminate in this big show at the end of the summer. And then from there, I did professional shows as a sophomore and junior and senior in high school. I did professional shows with this Theater for Young America, and they really gave me confidence as an actor and as a person as well. And that being said, I'm a shy person. I'm not incredibly outgoing. I have to feel comfortable in this situation to be outgoing. And if I'm, around my friends or, then I feel confident and I can be outgoing. But going and doing those acting classes at TYA was really the right thing for me at that time. It was really good for me. And it then set me on a course to go to university to be an actor. And so that's what I did. One of my peers there, well, actually, he's a couple of years older than me. His name's Sean McCall. He said, you should check out this acting program. And it was not too far away from where I lived in Kansas City. It was in St. Louis, which is about 3.5-hour drive east. And it was at a college called Webster University, and it was a conservatory program for actors. And so that's what I ended up doing. I applied to one college. I auditioned for it, and I got in. It was the only place I wanted to go. And so I went to the Conservatory of Theater Arts at Webster University and became an actor. And every once in a while, in fact, I would bring out puppets. I had brought some puppets with me that I had made, and I remember sophomore year doing like an icebreaker when the new freshmen coming in. They had heard, I guess, that I had an interest in puppetry, and they said, "Can you come and just kind of like help break the ice with these freshmen?" And I do remember going around with a puppet and just with a puppet in my hand and just going up to people and just trying to, get them to loosen up and doing that. And And I met a friend in college, my friend Chad Harris in college, who later became a roommate, and he got me to come with him and do some summer work as a puppeteer. He got me to come and
doing what?
Yeah, to go around to daycare centers to do a water safety program. So that's what I did for a summer in between my first and second year of college. And that's how I made money.
So then, like, obviously you're acting while you're not doing these puppetry. What kind of shows were you doing in college?
I went to school as an actor as opposed to a musical theater actor. So, but I still did take voice lessons to do singing stuff. But I would do first year you're not able to do any shows. Second year you can do shows. And then at the time that I was going, I don't know if it's still the same now, but at the time I was going, after second year, they would evaluate you and decide whether or not you were able to stay in the program or whether they would cut you. So, I did a bunch of different shows, but my senior year, I got to do As You Like It. So I did some Shakespeare. I did Cabaret, which was a musical, and I played Cliff in that. And then I also, senior year, got to do... at the campus there at Webster University, they also it also houses the St. Louis Repertory Theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to do a professional show there. We did 6 Degrees of Separation, and I was in that show as well. So I was in a lot of different shows over my time at Webster, and my goal was to be an actor. Now, at the same time, there was some part of me that said, you should maybe just make a videotape of some sort of yourself doing puppetry and send it to the Jim Henson Company. I think it was called Jim Henson Productions at the time. So I did. I made a tape in my senior year of college, my final year of college. I sent a tape off to the Jim Henson Company, and because my goal was to go to New York. I was going to go to New York to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a lovely letter back that was a rejection letter. That said, thank you very much. We see a lot of tapes. There's, it was a form letter, and it was signed by a person named Renee Rochelle, who was the talent coordinator at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
later down the road did play an important part in my life. When I got to New York.
Yep. So, do you remember what you did for that initial tape?
I do. I did a show that I had written called The Broken Vase. And it was too long, and it was, and I knew that I needed to use a monitor. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that that's how Muppet performers worked, but I didn't know how to do that yet. I mean, it was just kind of like, I just tried it and did it, and looking back, I would have, had I known, I would have lip synced a song. I would have done something shorter. I would have done littler things, but I did not. And I got this rejection letter, but it was very nice. And,
Well, I remember this is going back 2009, I want to say. You very kindly gave me some advice because I'd decided I'm going to be a puppeteer, and I remember you specifically said to me, lip sync to a song.
Mm-hmm.
I did I'm Sad Because I'm Happy by Grover.
Uh-huh.
I'm not Grover, sorry, Oscar. And then do a quick thing, make it 2 minutes. That's it. And I obsessed. I reckon I taped that thing about 10 times.
Oh my gosh.
In the end. As you can see, I am now a lead Muppet performer. That's obviously not. Yes, no, I have got that same, probably the same rejection letter. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So then what happens between sort of after college, after this rejection letter, to actually getting somewhere with Henson?
All right, so I'll try to say it in a nutshell. So I went back to Kansas City, moved to Kansas City to make some money to move to New York. And in that time, I did some theater shows at the Missouri Repertory Theater and some other smaller theaters in Kansas City. At the same time, I also had my own puppet company that would go out and do shows for daycare centers. And I had a program of shows. I figured out how to do a program of shows, just like, would come back to them every month for 4 months over the summer or something like that. And these were puppets that I had made as well, and they were much better than my original masking tape T-shirt puppets. But still, they weren't definitely not. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I still had these puppets, and they worked great. And so we were going to move to New York. My now wife, Kelly, then my girlfriend, Kelly, we were going to move to New York, and we came to New York. We got an apartment, but we couldn't get in right away, so we were going to go and stay for the month with her mom in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And on our way to Ohio, we had picked up the Backstage newspaper, which is the acting audition newspaper for actors in New York. And inside, Kelly saw an ad that had a picture of Kermit the Frog on it. It said, "Do you measure up to be a Muppet?" And then it basically said, if you do, if you're left-handed, if you are this tall, and it basically described me.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, "Contact us here." Now, I did contact them, and I said, "Look, I am left-handed, but I am a right-handed puppeteer." And they called me and said, "Let us know when you make it to New York." I said, "Okay." And when we got to New York finally, I contacted them, and then that was this audition that I had with John Henson for the Coca-Cola Polar Bear.
So let's talk about that for a sec, because I've heard, I did a tiny bit of research for this, not a ton. I've seen two stories about the Coca-Cola Bear and this audition. One said that you got the role and that you were doing that. Another said that as you were literally walking in, you bump into Carol Spinney, who tells you, okay, you've shaken
No, that's
your head
wrong.
at that.
That is
Okay.
incorrect. Yes.
Which is what I guessed.
Yes. That is
but
wrong.
That is
happened
out there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see that one, but that is not quite it. So I go to this audition with John Henson, and I'm the last guy to go. And I put on, they had kind of it was a prototype of the, if I remember correctly, it was kind of, it had been made into a full Coca-Cola Polar Bear that John was actively out doing. He was going to big Coca-Cola events, and he was, he was, I think even, if I remember correctly, at one of the Olympics, he went to the Olympics and skied downhill in this Coca-Cola Polar Bear. That's at least what I remember hearing. Yeah. But I met John, and after I auditioned, he said, "Do you want to go to lunch?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I want to go to lunch with you." And we went to lunch and we talked some more. And at that lunch, he said, "Do you want to come to my house for New Year's Eve?" And I was like, "Yes, of course I want to come to your house for New Year's Eve. Why wouldn't I?" So Kelly and I went up to his house in Saugerties, New York, and we had a lovely time. And John was so sweet and so kind to me. And he asked me then, soon after that, I started, I was kind of his understudy for the Coca-Cola Polar Bear. When he was not available to do gigs because he was very busy, I would go and do that in his place. Yeah. And he was so nice. And somewhere along in there, when I was doing that job, of course, I was working other jobs as well, like an actual day job. I worked at a pet food store on the Upper West Side of New York on 81st and Amsterdam. And I was working there. And I decided to make another puppet video, which I did. And I lip-synced a song. And I did short little bits. And after that, I got another letter from that same Renee Rochelle that said, "Come to this workshop." So I went to this workshop, and it was taught by Camille Benora and people like, I think Stephanie DeBruzzo was there, and there were a bunch of other people that were there. And I have a terrible memory about this, but I'm told that this happened. No, I was there at this. We were at a dance studio, and there was an improv workshop. And not long after that, I believe, is when Renee Rochelle got in touch with me again, and she said, "Can you do a Big Bird voice?" And I was like, "Yes." I'd never done a Big Bird voice. Why would I? So of course you say yes. I then proceeded to go out and get, I think The Bird is the Word CD is what I think. I went to Tower Records at the time, which was a place because you could actually go to a store and buy physical media. And I listened to The Bird is the Word, and I remembered what Big Bird sounded like from when I was a kid. And then that is what made me I then went to this audition with some other people that are our current Muppet performers, in fact.
Yep.
And we were there. I'd never met them before. And that is where I met Carol Spinney, and where Renee Rochelle introduced me and said, "This is Matt Vogel." And he said, his eyes lit up, and he said, "Oh, Vogel, your name means bird in German. This may be the job for you." And so that is how I met him. I didn't bump into him on the street for, going to the other audition.
And I want to say it's a fairly credible website that had that. We're gonna have to correct it.
It's Tough Pigs, isn't it? Gosh,
it's Tough Pigs. Damn that Hennes. He's not gonna like me saying that. So let's talk about then that audition for Big Bird. Is that the one that there's footage of in I Am Big Bird?
Yes.
Okay, so that initial then audition, was it, all right, you do the voice a little bit first, or was it immediately, right, put on this puppet and let's see what you can do?
To my memory, it was put this puppet on, let's see what you can do.
That is daunting.
Yeah, it is, because the man's right there. Carol is right there. And that I think in that movie, I Am Big Bird, I think you do see that's me getting into Big Bird for the very first time ever. And, it's very weird to be trying to do the voice of a character right in front of the person that actually does that character.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we don't do understudies like that. There's not understudies.
Yeah.
But Carol was 65 years old at the time.
Mm.
We do one voice. That's what it is. One person, one voice.
But then you still sort of did trade off Big Bird a little bit, like you would do Journey to Ernie and stuff
That's
like that.
That's right. The reason why, to my knowledge, the reason why I did Journey to Ernie was because it was very physical. It was a very physical thing, and there was so much dialogue for Big Bird to do, and it was all on blue screen, and that was never Carol's favorite thing to do anyway. It would have been impossible for him to do all of that ADR. It just was so much, and so they kind of tried it. I really do feel like it was a mistake. And that's me saying that, it was a it was a mistake, and I it's my voice up there, but it watered down the character for a little while. It made it be less than what it should have been, because it was like these two different versions of Big Bird.
Because they would quite often be within, like, you could have a street story of Big Bird where it's Carol, and then it would immediately, I should say, go into Journey to Ernie where it's you. So I can certainly see that jarring sort of thing.
It's weird to me, and it wasn't my favorite thing, but that wasn't my choice. It wasn't a call. It wasn't my call. And Carol, of course, as he always did with me, he always treated me like I was a son. He really treated me he was so sweet and so kind to me. And I looked out for him as well. He looked out for me, and I looked out for him as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little about Carol then. Have you got a favorite Carol moment of your years with him?
Oh, jeez.
Can't make it easy on you.
I do remember, and this was I barely knew him. There's two things. So one was, I don't even know if I'd met him at this point, but I had an experience with him, or Big Bird, really. We were doing an appearance, I think it was at the opening of the new Victory Theater in Times Square. And I was there. I was there to do Sweetham's Eyes for John, and Big Bird was going to be there also. And I remember seeing Big Bird come out onto stage, and I really had a moment where I thought he saw me. I really thought, because it's such this beautiful, you don't see a performer, you just see this Big Bird, and it's just so beautiful, and Carol was just perfect in that role. And I really had a moment where I thought, oh, he's looking right at me. It just hit me right in the chest. It was beautiful. Yep. That was one moment. And it wasn't really about Carol, but it was about that character that he embodied. Mm-hmm. The next time I think it was maybe the second time I ever had conversations with him. We had done a workshop with me and with him as Big Bird, with me as Big Bird. And he was there. And after... he said, how are you getting home? And I said, I'm just, I'm going across town, because it was on the east side and I lived on the west side. And he said, let's share a taxi. And we shared a taxi. And he was just so down to earth and easygoing and just kind to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he picked up the cab fare, and, he was just so nice. Yeah. Those are the two things that come to my mind right away.
Yeah, it's one of my few regrets, is that I will never get a chance to shake his hand. We didn't really ever connect. He was very nice to me through other people. When the whole I Am Big Bird was getting released, I was meant to do a video chat with him, and for whatever reason, it wasn't going to work. And he made a point of saying, "Well, let's organise another time. It'll just be one-on-one. And I remember thinking to myself that day, like, A, he didn't have to do that. Right. B, even if it's an empty gesture, which I don't think it would have been, it still just was like, what like an amazing person to actually go out of his way and be like, well, no, I'll take time out of my day and we'll do this. And then when that didn't happen, he was meant to come to Melbourne for the premiere of it here. And he had specifically said to the directors who I was in contact with, oh, that guy who I was meant to do video chat, let's invite him out for dinner. And so they had said, hey, just letting you know, we this might happen. And in the end, he didn't end up coming out. They didn't end up coming at all. But again, just that, like, it's that little thing of like, you know, when he passed, I had to think about how I was going to write about him on the website. And I just told that story because I'm like, how do I eulogize a man I didn't meet? But then I'm like, well, I almost met him. And
yeah, and you saw the efforts.
He was. Yeah.
You saw his efforts to try to, you know, that's the thing that I was so impressed about, and still am impressed about Carol, is that with fans, he would take the time to draw a picture on whatever it was, the book of his book or whatever it was. He would take a minute to draw something, you know, and he was a great artist, but just to take the time, like now 100 more times, and then maybe 100 more times after that, he would just take that moment because he knew it was special. He knew that was a moment that person would never forget. He knew it was just this pure, special moment.
Yeah, I mean, even, you know, obviously towards the end of his life, as his, you know, as his illness was sort of taking over, he was still going to these conventions and giving people, you know, that one-on-one interaction with him. And I mean, for someone who was going through what he was at that time, to still be putting yourself out there for the fans is genuinely incredible.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, let's talk then about moving on from Big Bird. You've obviously got The Count as well.
Right.
And that sort of transitions us a little bit into Jerry. So obviously Jerry decides he's, you know, can't maybe puppeteer as much anymore. How does it then become you taking over The Count, at least puppetry at first, and then obviously the voice later on?
So I'd been Jerry's right hand for quite a while. You know, I started out on Sesame Street. My main gig was really, if I wasn't assisting Kevin with something, like doing the feet of Elmo, because John Tartaglia mostly did Elmo's right hand and stuff like that, I would be David Rudman's right hand for Baby Bear. And then as years went on, I then was oftentimes cast by Kevin as Jerry's right hand for The Count.
Yep.
So I did a lot of right-handing for Jerry over the years, not just as The Count, but whatever he happened to be playing. And when the time came that Jerry was on oxygen and could no longer just physically put the puppet up over his head, it was decided, because I was the right hand. I mean, I don't know really what the genesis of it was, but for some reason the thought was, hey, let's have Matt put the puppet on, and Jerry, why don't you sit off to the side and you do the lines live on the set, and Matt will just catch them and he'll just do them. And that's what happened. I mean, we did that for a while, and I would wear headphones like I have on now, and I would just sit there, and I could hear him breathe. I could hear that the oxygen machine would make a little sound, you know. But I could also hear him, you know, take that breath in and then do his lines. And, you know, you'd never know that this man had lung difficulty. Yeah. You just would never know, because his voice, first of all, was so unique and remarkable. And he would deliver 100% every time. You would never know he wasn't feeling good that day. You would just never know. He was 100% there every time. He was a consummate professional, and he brought it.
So then, after Jerry passes, you take on the role of the Count, you know, the voice as well. Was it something you had to audition for? Was it something you had been sort of planning to do? Was it a given that you were going to be doing it?
There was no given. There was no audition. There was no planning.
So then how did
I
it
don't
happen?
know. I don't know how it happened. I really
Okay.
don't, because that was not one. Unlike the Disney Muppets, there was no plan. Jerry had not necessarily said, Matt's my guy.
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And at some point along there, I was told, why don't you do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was, Jerry wanted you to do this. I don't know. I just know that I ended up at one point doing it. And I think the first thing that I did was I think one of the first things I did was that counting the views on YouTube. I think
Yep.
may have been the first thing that I did.
With the count, had it been a voice that you had been, were you doing it sometimes when Jerry wasn't there and he was ADRing, or you were only ever doing it when he was in the room?
I don't remember. I don't think I'd ever done it. I'd never done my version of it or any version of it. I don't, because he was always there to my memory. And maybe if he wasn't, I mean, there may have been a trial run of figuring out what that voice might be, but
Well, I asked.
I never had
because,
it in my head of like, I'm going to do this one day. I never thought that.
You won't remember this, but in 2008, I actually got to come to Sesame Street as your guest. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. Yeah, we have pictures, I think.
Yeah, we do.
We have pictures.
Yeah, that was long before I was in the Muppet fan world. That was all due to title of show, if you remember.
Yeah, I do.
And I remember at one point you came over and said, "Who do you want a photo with?" And I said, "Ernie and Bert."
Yep.
And for whatever reason, we didn't get Ernie, but Eric went and got Bert, and you came over with the count. And I remember sitting there at one point, like hearing you, like you weren't saying.
Did I do a voice?
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
Yeah, you did, and or at least in my memory, you did.
I'm sure you're right. I mean, usually when somebody comes up to do a photo, we do try to kind of do a voice.
Yeah. And yeah, you did this voice of the count. And I remember thinking after it'd been announced that you were taking over, and again, unless it was my, nostalgic memory of this day coming back in, but I do remember thinking, oh yeah, no, he's going to be good. Yeah.
Oh boy.
All right, we're in safe hands. So yeah, it surprises me that you hadn't actually been doing the voice. So again, unless I've just made this up. But
I mean, like I say, when somebody comes in and they're like, I'd like a picture with Oscar or whoever, Rover, and, the person's not there, Eric's not there, Carol wasn't there, somebody would pick up the puppet and they would do a version of that just to kind of like make them feel like, oh, yeah, I'm really interacting with the character. You know what I mean?
If I remember correctly, I think you picked up Oscar, because I've definitely got a photo with Oscar, and did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would have done some sort of voice with it probably.
And then we'll come back to Jerry shortly.
Right.
But staying with Sesame, you've been doing these workshops. Like, you're one of the, I guess, instructors, teachers, what you will. How did you become one of these instructors? And in doing this, what are you looking for in a puppeteer when someone comes in for these things?
So, after Kevin Clash left Sesame Workshop, he was the puppet captain, and I had been the assistant puppet captain for several years. So I was just kind of trailing him, shadowing him, and, if he couldn't be at a production meeting, I would be there, and just kind of learning and following along and watching. And then after he left, then they said, okay, you're the puppet captain now. And I was like, oh, okay. And I asked Marty Robinson to be the assistant puppet captain with me. And so in being the puppet captain, one of the responsibilities is to see what talent is out there, to see who's out there. And Kevin had his stable of people, and he had a bench of people that he used, but I had no idea who was out there now, who was there. This was in 2013. And so I organized a workshop in 2014. And Marty and I looked through like 325 video submissions that were either like a minute or 2 minutes or something like that,
Yep.
And we made evaluations and made very tough choices because we had to get it down to literally 50 people.
Yeah.
Which is hard because there were well over 50 people that could have been at that first workshop. It just was we couldn't. As it was, we had to split up our 25 and 25, half a week and half a week. You know what I mean? Just to see who was there. But the goal was just to see who's out there and see what they had, and to bring them in and see how they interact with each other, and if they can listen to direction, and if they can do what we ask them to do. And Marty has been doing this for, decades, longer than myself, and Peter Lintz as well, who I asked to come in and help us out with that first workshop, I believe. And if he wasn't at that first workshop, he was at workshops after that for sure, because he's done so much of it. Me being kind of the newbie at workshops, I just kind of was guiding, and I guess what I tried to do is say my focus is going to be on the acting part of it, because that's my forte is the acting. So I'll keep an eye on that, and I'll keep an eye on the technical stuff too. But I'll also lean heavily on Marty and see if we can see if anybody comes out of this.
Yeah.
But we're obviously we're looking for performers that are able to work on monitors. We are looking for people that can bring bold characters to life, that are not afraid to fail, that have good instincts, and are good people.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with people that aren't
Yeah, of course.
nice people. So I want to find people that are nice, and nobody wants to work with people that aren't nice. So
No, of course not.
So those are kind of the things that we're looking for. And to be honest, in that first workshop, there were some people that I was like, okay, they don't really need to come back again, because I don't need to see them again. Yeah. And there are other people that I was like, well, I'm going to keep an eye on them. I'm going to keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we progressed. Then in other workshops, we would sometimes take people from that first workshop and say, okay, we want to bring you in and now do a character workshop and kind of push you a little further. So each workshop is different.
Yeah.
Has a different focus.
Is it something you guys are hoping to do more of? Obviously, when the world isn't in chaos, you're hoping to do more of?
Yeah, we like to do... Sesame Workshop would like for us to do 1, if not 2 a year. That's the goal. I mean, obviously, there's a giant pandemic that kind of prevents us from doing that right now.
Yeah.
But the hope is that we'll be able to come back and do more of that, when we can, when it's safe to do so. We're always trying to find. I'm always looking to deepen the bench of Sesame Muppet performers.
Yep.
In some way, to see who else is out there, and to kind of find people and bring them in to this world when I can.
Well, obviously with these workshops, you're talking to people about character. That brings us back to Jerry Nelson. Something you got to do was to actually have a sit down, specifically I think about the Muppets, sit down and talk to Jerry about his characters when it was decided that you were going to be taking on, Floyd, Robin, whoever it was. Right. Can you talk a little bit about that meeting?
Yeah, sure. It was in a hotel in New York City, and I was there, and David Rudman was there, and Steve Whitmire was there, and Debbie McClellan, who was in charge of the Muppets at the time, was there, and Marty Robinson was there, and of course Jerry was there. And we just all sat around Jerry. Like Jerry was sitting on the sofa, and I was just sitting on the floor. David and Marty and I were just all sitting on the floor looking at him. And Steve would ask questions, and Debbie would ask some questions. We would ask questions too, just about the characters and how he saw them, how they kind of came to be.
Yep.
How Floyd met Dr. Teeth, the relationship of Floyd and Janice, how that came about. And the reason why David was there really was because, the reason why we were all there was that Jerry had decided that he no longer wanted to travel with and do the travel that Muppets that was entailed with Muppets.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to kind of not do that anymore. And I believe it was Steve that said, we need to find a person or people that will carry these roles on for you. So it's not, I guess up to that point, it had been just random people that were doing the characters for Jerry and for Richard. And so David was there really primarily to do for Richard's characters, for Janice and for Scooter. And David had worked with Richard very closely over the years, was his assist on Sesame Street, and just they were really close. And so it just kind of made sense. And Jerry talked about Janice and didn't talk about Scooter, but that I remember, but did talk about Janice and that relationship between Janice and Floyd, and at a certain point he brought out Floyd. They brought Floyd out for him, and at another point they brought out Robin for him. And I remember him saying for Robin, it was all about, he felt like, because that voice, his voice was so amazing. And at one point, I remember this because I've seen the videotape. There's a videotape of it, and I remember saying, "Your voice is so," and he goes, "Say it," and I go, "It's so unique," and he's like, "Ah!" He just had it like, because his voice was so unique and amazing. And he said, with Robin, it's like I'm sucking through a straw. I try to keep my mouth really small and try to suck through a straw, and so that was became something to latch on to. Once the decision was made. But it was just, first of all, it was just amazing being in a room with Jerry Nelson and just hearing him talk about his life and talk about these characters and just hear his perspective on things. It was really special. It was amazing. So and I can't believe I was in that room.
Yeah,
but I was.
So you start to take on Floyd. Obviously, you also take on Uncle Deadly.
Yes. But at that time, that was really because it was written in the 2011 Muppets movie. It was written in that, and because it was a Jerry character, they said, "Okay, you're going to do that." And I didn't have.
So you didn't have to audition.
No, not for that.
Really? Okay, that's great.
And it was not written as. It wasn't totally written. I mean, obviously, he's evolved a lot since, especially because of the ABC Muppet series. He evolved a lot, But we would, especially Bill and I on the set of that film, there's tons of just stuff with us messing around. Just because Bobo and Uncle Deadly together it's a ridiculous combination. I mean, there are scenes and scenes of us just saying whatever comes to the top of our head in the middle of a scene with Chris Cooper. It's ridiculous. Of course, all of that got cut, but it was certainly fun, and it also made me find things in that character that, because I'd researched the character, and I knew that he was this phantom character, this kind of very, very big acting. He just had a lot of
gravitas.
Yes, a lot of gravitas. That's exactly right. And he was very aloof. But by the time we got to the ABC series and they had cast him as Miss Piggy's valet, really, and they started writing him to be certainly a lot more flamboyant. But I would say, the thing about that, doing him on that show, is that I never really wanted to learn too much about him. I only wanted just hints of who maybe he is. I never really wanted to define him. I don't know. He was a great character. He's a great character, and I love playing him. There's a lot of latitude with him, I think, than some of the other characters that I play, just because he didn't do a ton on the Muppet Show. Jerry kind of started out, and he did this John. His interpretation was a John Carradine voice, this large voice kind of character, and a lot of times that's what Jerry would do. He would pick a voice from radio, and he would then emulate it as a character.
So with this evolution then of Deadly, what have you had much? Obviously, the ABC series, you guys were being written for, but did you have much say in sort of how he came? Did you have much say in the whole, Uncle Deadly Piggy sort of friendship that seems to have stuck around?
I didn't have a lot of say in it. but I wasn't opposed to it for sure.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
certainly something that was interesting, and doing that ABC series, certainly tonally, a lot of things I have personally I have problems with a lot of the tonal things in that show. But as an actor working on a sitcom and getting the material that we would get regularly, it was just a joy. It was so much fun to just like dig into these characters and do things that we wouldn't normally do with these characters. That doesn't mean we necessarily should, but we did things that were unique and different. And one of the things in that is finding that relationship between Piggy and Deadly. It's a great combination because he can very quickly and easily cut her down, and she's mostly oblivious to it.
Yeah.
She mostly doesn't get it, but the audience does.
And I think that's the best part about that relationship is, I've got mixed feelings on Piggy. But I think what she needs is someone who can, a foil. She needs someone who can cut her down to size, and that she doesn't immediately, as soon as that happens, karate chop them.
Yes, and she probably would never do that to him. I don't think she ever would. I think she respects him. I think she respects him. I think they respect each other, and but I do think he doesn't really take a lot of her guff. But what's great about playing him is literally, Jarrod, I could put that puppet on and it's just channeling something. I don't. A lot of times with characters, I ask, can I get something? Can you write something for me? Can it be written out so I can kind of make changes? But with Deadly, a lot of times I'm just like, I just put the puppet on and I just say whatever comes to my mind, which is weird to do that.
Well, you've got another character who can really say whatever the heck he wants. You've got Constantine.
Yeah, he's another one.
So, that obviously Muppets Most Wanted comes out. Where did you find Constantine, if that makes sense? Like, where in you was Constantine?
Well, I will say that I love Constantine because he is an idiot. He thinks he's all of that, but he is really just an idiot. And that's probably a lot of me. I think that could be pieces of me. Or I think with any of these characters, you take a little. It's a thing that Jerry Nelson said. He takes a piece of himself and he blows it up. Whether it's the Count obsessing about numbers and he just blows that up, or for me, it's just that. That feeling I think that we all have from time to time that we've got this. I'm in charge, but knowing full well that you're probably not in charge.
Yeah.
And I love playing him because you're right. He is another one that I can pretty much just put on and say whatever comes to my mind.
Well, the beauty of him as well is, because I know you've spoken on this, on Below the Frame, is that when you get to actually create a character and originate a character, there's a big difference, I think, between obviously, taking on, say, Kermit to playing Constantine and originating him.
Yes.
So what is it then about these original characters do you think you really get to sink your teeth into?
There's such a freedom in creating a character out of nothing. He wasn't created out of nothing. James Bobin had an idea of what he wanted him to be. He wanted him to be this doppelganger for Kermit. But just after doing the audition and then getting the role and then working on the character with James and getting a dialect coach to try to help with this weird Russian accent that then kind of became this weird kind of him trying to be this odd Kermit sounding thing. And it's just this collaboration that the ultimate goal is just to entertain the audience. But there are no constraints. Really, you can almost do anything because I'm putting the stamp on it. Nobody else is going to put that stamp on it before me. It's me doing it. So nobody can say it's wrong.
Exactly right.
You know what I mean? Nobody
Yeah.
can say it's wrong because I'm like, but I created it, so it isn't wrong. It's me.
Yeah. Well, moving on, you very publicly get handed Kermit the Frog. We're not obviously going to get into that whole debacle. But
Was it a debacle?
yeah, that's one word I'd use for it.
Right,
I know
sure.
you'd already recorded some stuff with Kermit before the debacle was publicized, I guess. But did that sort of public nature of your casting add to the pressure? Or you're able to sort of set that aside and just sort of focus on getting the character down and doing your job?
Well, I mean, there's two sides of it, right? I mean, there's the public side of it that's, difficult to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
It can be difficult to avoid, whatever it might be. And especially in today's social media world,
Mm-hmm.
where everybody who has an opinion about anything can say whatever they want.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah.
But my job as the performer of Kermit the Frog is to deliver Kermit the Frog how I've been instructed to do so.
Yeah.
And so I do have to kind of I have to think about that character. I can't be worrying about these people aren't going to like it or these people are going to judge me or whatever. I can't worry about that outside influence. And I will tell you, though, I've been doing this for 23 years. If I had been doing this for a year or 2 years or 7 years, it might be a lot different for me.
Yeah.
It might feel and impact me a lot differently.
Yeah.
But having the confidence of 20-some years under my belt and the support of, the 5 Muppet performers alongside of me, next to me, and the Muppet Studio, and many, many, many fans as well, doesn't hurt.
So then, obviously you've had a little bit of experience playing, these iconic characters because, you're Big Bird. And,
Yep.
But playing Kermit the Frog, is there what does that feel like, to, I guess, the little boy from Kansas who was playing with Kermit dolls when he was 5? Do you think back and sort of, what do you think that would mean to him then? If he knew that one day he would grow up to be Kermit the Frog?
I think his head would have exploded.
Mm-hmm.
I never would have thought the things that I get to do. I never would have ever thought that I'd get to do them. It was not in the realm of possibility for me. I'm just going to pick like Camilla playing, Camilla the chicken.
Mm-hmm.
Who I never would have thought that I'd get to play Camilla the chicken. Or, I never think that I'd get to work alongside Dave Goles and call him a friend, or any of the people that I work with who I'm so every day I am blown away by their talent and by their abilities. I'm so grateful, and so that little 3rd grade, 4th grade boy, his head would have exploded. Sometimes I pinch myself still and go, I can't believe we have this job. We're so lucky.
So, well, man, now you get to talk to these people on Below the Frame. See how
I do.
See how I segued
Yeah,
that? That was pretty good.
nicely done.
Thank you.
Well done, Jarrod. Yeah.
But look, well, the genesis of Below the Frame was a Facebook live show that you were doing.
Yes, it was.
Like during lunch.
That's
was it
right.
Something that you had just gone one day, I'm going to do this, or had you been planning it for a little while? What was the
I hadn't
sort of
been
genesis
planning
of
it. Okay, so I heard of this thing called Facebook Live, and I was on Facebook, and I thought, I wonder what it would be like if I just started doing a Facebook Live, and just like from my dressing room, and then I'll just walk down the hall to the Muppet room, and so I just did that. And there were a bunch of people in the Muppet room, and it's kind of the pilot. I guess we called it the pilot. But and there was I had no thoughts about what it was going to be or anything really. But then in that, going down to the Muppet room and walking around and talking to everybody down there, after I was like, well, maybe we'll do this again. Maybe we'll come back and we'll like figure out what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I roped Stephanie into it, and I was like, you need to help me with this. And so we kind of came up with a couple different things to do during it, including like ask a puppeteer about not puppets, and
Mm-hmm.
then we would ask somebody how they got to Sesame Street, and then maybe we'd do a puppet segment where people would learn how to do some sort of puppetry thing. And so we tried to do that for like the first season, and I forget how many episodes we did, but we did a lot, considering we were working at the same time. And this was our lunch break. But it was really fun. And we all had a great time. And we would have people come into our green room, the Muppet room, and just sit there just to watch and be kind of a part of it. And that's kind of how it started. That's where it began. And then we did it. We did a lot less the second season of it, just because that was, I forget what season that was, for Sesame. But we got a lot busier, and it was just a lot harder to make things happen. And then I think the third season, which was, I think we were shooting season 50 of Sesame Street. I think we did one episode. I think that's all we had time for, because we were literally doing something every day during lunch, PR for Sesame 50 or whatever we were doing. And then at some point, during this lockdown pandemic, I thought maybe this might be a good time to start working on Below the Frame, but I can do it from home, and everybody's at home.
Yep.
So maybe I can wrangle them into helping me, letting me interview them. But because it's a podcast and it's all, you're hearing it, we couldn't do the fun stuff that we could do in the Muppet room. But that's okay. I think, it has to evolve somehow, and that's how it evolved.
So then, well, obviously you've kept in Ask a Puppeteer about not puppets.
Yes.
All this sort of thing. You have sketches where you're talking about eye focus, like you're almost selling eye focus, or you're selling lip sync, or whatever it is. How did you decide to evolve those moments that you would usually do in a visual medium into a audio visual?
Yeah, so I thought I can't just have it be a straight interview. I need to have something in there, some comedy, or I want to have something in there that teaches something, but I don't want it to just be this dry, lip sync thing.
Yeah.
I need it to feel how can we do this and make it unique? So that's where I kind of came up with this idea of doing these fake ads, and then I just started. I literally one day I sat down and I think I wrote 10 of them, 10 of the ads, or something like that. Maybe it was 8, whatever it was. It was a lot. And they just kept pouring out of me. And then I asked some people to record some stuff for them, and they did. And then I asked our Sesame Street mentees, because we have 8 mentees that are on Sesame Street, and they are kind of up-and-coming puppeteers that all have been at workshops for Sesame Workshop, and we're kind of bringing them along and deepening our bench. And so I asked them, I said, this might be a good way to kind of work on some character stuff. You guys want to do some ads? And they were all like, yeah, we want to do ads. So they were all like contributing voices to it. And and I put it all together. And then at the end of that, I would then talk about what the real issue was. If it was lip sync, we would talk about the importance of that, and maybe have a moment where we really would learn something.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
I was just going to say, on the other side of that was that I had those stories of Jerry's that Jan had given me, and I really wanted to honor Jerry in some way, and so that's where that came from. And then I had this CD of Jerry's songs that he had just like demos and stuff, and I was like, I definitely want to get this out there somehow. So Jan said, yeah, do it.
Well, the Jerry stories are, I think, some of the most interesting parts of this podcast, in what is already a very insightful, interesting podcast. But just, listening, I listened to Dave Rudman tell one a couple of, say a week or so ago while I was at work. And I was doing delivery driving, and I had to pull over because I was so engrossed in this story. It was yeah, it was fascinating. And then again, you've got this music, even the ones that say the audio quality isn't great. You had Ragmop.
Yep.
The other day.
Yeah.
And again, I was driving for work and I was bouncing and bopping along and singing along. It was great. So obviously you've got a plethora of Muppet performers no longer with us. What made you decide Jerry was the one you wanted to spotlight the most?
Well, it really is because, I've had a lot of mentors in my life, but Jerry certainly was one of them. And after he had died, it is a true story that Jan, his wife, had said, she just passed this kind of a digital folder along to me and said, I don't know what to do with these. Maybe you'll figure out something to do with them. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, and a lot of them are just little stories, and not necessarily related. Obviously, that story, that David read was not about Muppets at all. Mm-hmm. But it was about a piece of his life, and he had been writing these little stories, things that he remembered from his life, and I just, after he had died, I thought, well, what am I gonna do? How can I honor Jerry? And I thought, maybe we'll make like Joey Mazzarino and I were thinking, maybe we'll make a website for him, and it'll be someplace where you can go and read these stories or something. I don't know. And then, they kind of were put away, and I never really did anything with them because I couldn't find the right thing. I just couldn't find the right thing to do with them. And then this podcast came about, and it was an afterthought. It was not initially one of the thoughts. I did think early on, I thought, if I could get access to some stuff that nobody's heard, some Jerry stuff, and hear him talk. And I do have some stuff that maybe will come around at some point of Jerry talking, and that nobody would have heard.
Yeah.
But then I remembered, oh gosh, I've got those stories that he wrote, and I dug back through them, and I thought this might be the way to get those out there and have people that knew Jerry say the stories and give a memory about Jerry, which is my favorite part, is that they talk about Jerry in such a loving way, and then they read this story of him. I just feel like it just feels so personal, and it just helps elevate who Jerry was, and I love that part of it.
Well, it's gorgeous. It really is.
Thanks.
So I could talk to you for 27,000 hours. But one thing I want to do with you is at the end of Below the Frame, you always ask these rapid fire questions.
I do.
And I have asked you if I can ask them to you. You have agreed.
Yeah, I have agreed, but I'm going to tell you, Jarrod, I've never once thought of what my answer to these questions would be yet.
Well, unfortunately.
So good luck to everybody.
And I've got a little twist on a couple of them as well.
Okay, good. Good boy.
Okay, first question. What's the hardest part about being a puppeteer?
The hardest part about being a puppeteer is, I don't know how to word it. It's not messing up, but it's being able to stay in the moment. That's what it is. Being able to stay in the moment and not outside, because you're looking at a monitor and you are removed from yourself and the character in some way because you are watching yourself. But if you start to go down that rabbit hole of just watching yourself, you'll be out of the moment that you're acting in, and then you can't do it. So it's the hardest part.
What's the easiest part about being a puppeteer?
Just letting go when you have a character that is that you connect with, and just being free.
All right, here's the first little twist, because something we haven't spoken about. What is the hardest part about being a director? An Emmy Award-winning director, mind you.
The hardest part about being a director, in terms of puppets, it's that I have the knowledge that I might envision something in my head that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And knowing that the time that we have on Sesame Street, the very little time that we have to accomplish something, we might not be able to do that because what I might have in my head is not accomplishable.
What's the easiest thing? Yes, it does. What's the easiest thing about being a director?
Working with my friends because I know exactly what they're going through. So it's easy for me to be able to direct them.
What's your biggest strength as a performer?
Acting.
What is your biggest weakness as a performer?
My biggest weakness as a performer, I would say, is sometimes a lack of confidence.
What is your biggest strength as a director?
Having a vision.
What's your biggest weakness as a director?
Having a vision, because I think sometimes it can be too much. Not knowing. I actually do have a pretty good sense of knowing when whatever I'm thinking is not a great idea.
What's one of your favorite things about being a Muppet performer?
Working with the amazing friends that I get to work with. We just laugh a lot, and I love that. That's my favorite thing.
And finally, if you weren't a puppeteer or performer or director or actor, what would you be doing?
I would love to be a musician. You know? A real musician. I mean, I've dabbled, but I would love to be.
You've got the Mighty Weaklings.
Yeah, but I would love to really just do that. You know what I mean? If I couldn't do the other things.
Yeah. And I will on that say that while I love Below the Frame, I hate the theme song. Not because it's not great, but because it gets stuck in my head for 3 days after I've listened to an episode.
Excellent.
So,
that's good. That's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, really, Stephanie wrote it, so really you have to blame her.
All right, I'll definitely do that. Well, thank you very much, Matt. I genuinely appreciate you being here and chatting and all the nice things you've done for me over the years. Really, I do appreciate it.
Anytime.
And that was my chat with Matt Vogel. Thank you very much to Matt for joining us. Don't forget that this is also an episode of Good for a Change, so you do still need to give us 5 stars. I know, Sean and Holly weren't here, and it's a bonus episode, 5 stars only. You know the policy. Don't forget, you can always email us on goodforachangepodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media. I believe we're at Good for a Change on Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. Type in Good for a Change. You'll find us. I'm sure you will. I believe in you. Well, thank you very much, Holly. Oh, pip, pip, you're welcome. Chim, 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 chiree. Thank you very much, Sean. You're welcome. Thank you very much, Jarrod. You're welcome. Until next time. Bye. I can do all the voices because they're not here. This is such a better podcast.